Some people go to Harrogate for the water. Some go for Betty's scones. But this week, people will be flocking there for murder and skullduggery. But Betty's scones aren't bad either.
This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Dawes.
Well, Bob, it's the weekend of Harrogate, and neither of us are going to be there.
Alas, no. Not that we'll be missed, but anyone missing such a wonderful jamboree, such a wonderful festival, is definitely missing out. It's as we say later on, it's a great festival, and anyone is going to be there, and
Except for us.
Except for us. Well, I did say anyone who's anyone.
So this week, what's been happening in your world?
Well, do you know what? All sorts of things, really. It's been quite busy, and I've been reading lots of books, and I've been watching lots of television. And I usually give my some. It's all right for some, but usually I plug something here, and I'm going to be utterly shameless this week because I'm going to do a coming shortly for a series on Sky, which I happen to be in.
I wondered why you'd chosen that one.
Yeah. We don't usually do this, and certainly don't plug our books, but this is a series called Sick Note, which stars Rupert Grint, the wonderful Rupert Grint, the comic genius that is Nick Frost, and Lindsay Lohan. And I turn up, not in episode 1, so you'll be free from that particular burden if you do choose to watch it. But it's a wonderful conceit, really, and it is a crime. It's a guy who gets told by his doctor, played by Nick Frost, Rupert Grint gets told by his doctor that he's got an incurable disease, and then gets his life insurance. And then Nick Frost turns around as a doctor and says, "Gosh, I've made a terrible mistake with this. Can you keep it quiet?" So they decide to keep it quiet and keep the money. And that's where the real problems begin. Anyway, I turn up at some point playing a character called Shank, who's a psychopathic, drug-dealing monster. So playing well within my range.
So that's your usual kind of character?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's great fun. And I'm mentioning it, not because I'm in it, but there's a great ensemble cast with this as well, all much funnier and better than I am, I have to say. No false modesty there. And so it's well worth watching. It's on Sky. It starts on the 26th of July, so at 10 o'clock in the evening. So why not give it a look and see if it's your cup of tea?
Sounds very good. Is that going to be shown abroad as well?
Yes, well, it's on Sky, so anyone who has access to the Sky channels will be able to get it. I don't know whether it's on any other broadcast platforms, but as I say, look it up. If people who are much better at finding these sort of things than I am will know. Sick Note, it's called. So it was great fun to do.
I'll add it to my growing list.
Yes, of things to do.
What was Lindsay Lohan like working with?
Terrific.
Yeah.
I mean, she was, just everything you'd hope for. Actually, I mean, a touch of Hollywood, more than a touch of Hollywood. I mean, she does. She's
been at it for God knows how long.
She has.
30 years.
And my children were particularly impressed to be in a cast with both Lindsay Lohan and Rupert Grint. They were beside themselves. So I could do no wrong for about a couple of weeks last year.
You got that long, did you?
Yeah, I lasted that long. It did pretty good. A fortnight's not bad. But
until you told them you weren't going to let them meet Rupert Grint. And then that was it.
And then they haven't spoken to me since.
Well, my pick of the week actually doesn't often happen, but is a book from the author that we're actually speaking to this week.
Yes.
Just so happens this is a book that I wanted to recommend anyway. It is Dark Winter by David Mark, who is this week's guest. I'll read you the blurb off the back, seeing that's what you do. You cheat when you're doing these things, so I will too. Yes. DS Aector McAvoy is a man with a troubled past. His unwavering belief in justice has made him an outsider in the police force he serves. When 3 seemingly unconnected people are brutally murdered in the weeks before Christmas, the police must work quickly to stop more deaths. It is only McAvoy who can see the connection between the victims. A killer is playing God, and McAvoy must find a way to stop the deadly game. Now, that book has sold in huge numbers around the world, so I'm sure there's probably not many people left listening who haven't heard of it. But
Well,
That's
I mean,
mine.
it sounds wonderful. It's on my reading list. I'm taking it away next week, and I really look forward to it.
Yes, well, there are some other releases that I should mention that are coming up, which are looking very exciting. On the 7th of August, we have a book called The Forgotten by Casey Keller, which is the third instalment of the Byrne family series. It's a fantastic-looking book. I'll read the blurb here for you quickly as well. Nancy Byrne might be the head of the notorious Byrne crime family, but she's determined to give her little daughter Scarlett the best start possible. After the death of her beloved father, the notorious gangster Jimmy Byrne, nothing's stopping Nancy from making money on her own terms, even if she has to combine motherhood with providing for her entire family. But with enemies at their door, she'll do whatever it takes to protect her loved ones. But then comes the day when Scarlett goes missing, snatched by a stranger during a trip to the local park, and Nancy's world is torn apart. Amidst the terror of losing her precious daughter, Nancy is sure of only two things. Someone has taken her daughter, and when she finds them, there's going to be hell to pay. Can she find Scarlett before it's too late, or will Nancy's life of crime come back to haunt her in the worst way possible?
Dum, dum, dum.
Now, she has been selling like hotcakes,
Yes.
Casey Keller, in recent months and years, so that's going to be a
Well, she's a new name to me,
great book.
but I mean, she sounds
Really?
that sounds absolutely terrific. Well, you know me.
Well, she's very much
finger on what pulse?
Yeah, she's down that kind of city gritty,
Yes.
gangster crime. The kind of Martina Cole,
Yeah.
Judas A. Mitchell, that kind of
Yeah.
the crime family.
Urban grit.
Yes, yeah, but she's really, really good at it as well. So, definitely grab that one, The Forgotten by Casey Keller. That is out on the 7th of August. You can pre-order it, though, I believe.
Can you?
Yes.
Pray do tell.
Well, what a great segue. If you want to get hold of that book or any others you hear us talking about, listeners to Partners in Crime can get an exclusive 90%. 90%, yes, 90. 90.
That's,
90%.
90 with a percentage mark after it.
Yes,
Yeah.
off of your first ebook purchase from Kobo, the world's favourite bookshop, perfected. Head over to kobo.com, find the book that you want, and enter the promo code CRIME, all one word, at the checkout, and they'll give you 90% off. You can't beat that, can you?
You can't beat it. Well, I'm very sad because I've used mine up
Have
long
you?
ago.
Oh, well, I've been reading on Kobo for a fair while, so I was never actually eligible for the discount, but everybody listening, that includes you. Yes, you there in your car or wherever you are. I'm getting very smashy and nicey now.
You
aren't
are
I?
getting very smashy and nicey.
So we've done, 25, 26 episodes now, so I'm just getting carried away with it.
Yes, you have. Yeah. Well, why not? You've got to enjoy it.
Yeah,
You know, you've
I'm
got to
getting into my stride now.
infusing the airwaves. Do they call them airwaves anymore? Is that an old-fashioned?
It's all digital, isn't it?
This is the BBC home service.
Yes, it's all digital.
Aerials on top of broadcasting house. Nothing like that anymore.
No.
So there aren't airways. So I'm not.
We're
gonna
probably
go into a
coming down
science
somebody's
lesson.
broadband line, so it's probably no air involved, unless you're listening on Wi-Fi.
Oh right, yes. There must be some air in Wi-Fi.
Must be some air there somewhere, yeah. Anyway,
A lot of hot air.
yeah, plenty of that around here. Should we do an interview?
Yes. Do you know what? I think that's a very good idea, and I think that's one of the things we're tasked with doing. Let's commence.
David Mark is the author of the international best-selling DS Aector McAvoy series of crime books. His debut novel, entitled Dark Winter, became one of Richard and Judy's book club picks in 2012, alongside novels such as Gone Girl and The Fault in Our Stars. To date, the book has sold hundreds of thousands of copies in all formats, and it's been critically acclaimed around the world, as well as being translated into 6 languages. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, DS Aector McAvoy, have I pronounced that correctly?
It's close enough. He will answer to Hector, but he'll answer to pretty much everything, up to and including Hagrid. He's not a presumptuous man. There's not a great deal of pride about him. But yeah, Hector with a slight cough in the middle. It was a very obvious literary device to make him always seem that little bit removed, so people couldn't even have a conversation with him from a position of comfort. It was just, those people who are always having to spell their name to you. I always feel as though that must be exhausting. These Sarah without an H type people. I just think how much life is drained out of that. Telling you the right spelling of Sean I kind of wanted him to have a little bit of that.
I suppose that's a problem you've never had, being called David Mark. There's not many ways of spelling that,
I've
are
had 40 plus years of people calling me Mark, because the idea that you could have a Christian name as a surname is just mind-blowing to some people. It just doesn't make any sense. I've been welcomed on stage before now as "Please welcome Mark David," it makes no more sense to me. I don't really know how that works, but there you go. I'm not one to. Of all the things in my life to complain about, that's the least of any trouble, believe me.
Well, the way McAvoy is described in one of your books, I thought was brilliant. I'm just going to read out a passage now, if I may.
Please.
She remembers their first meeting, remembers that agonising walk from Queen's Gardens to Whole Crown Court. It had rained the night before, and the damp pavements were patterned with the crushed shells of snails that had not got out of the way as the city's commuters began their walks to work. McAvoy had kept stopping every 5 or 6 steps to pick up any snail he thought was in harm's way. He filled his pockets with them, then ran back to Queen's Gardens to put them safely on the grass. I don't know of any other fictional detective who would do that.
Well, I'm pleased that you like that, because I had to fight tooth and nail to keep that section in.
Oh, I think that sums him up beautifully in one paragraph.
Well, yeah, I must admit, I mean, when I try and feel him in my mind, it is that desperation to help. You know, that idea that you can't walk past. If you think you can do something, you do it. It's like he's a man incapable of compassion fatigue. you know, for whatever it might be. If it's within his purview to help, he will help. Whether you're, you know, a murder victim or whether you are a snail who is, you know, who might think he's got a really hard shell, but isn't gonna cope if somebody comes out of Greg's with a big shoe. So I'm always trying to think of ways to demonstrate how it feels to be him. And I'm pleased that you like that one anyway.
He's a gentle giant, isn't he?
He's the ultimate gentle giant. Yeah. It can't be easy to be a huge, great fella, because people either presume that you're going to be, you know, a doorman and a nutter, or they presume that, or every little fella wants to fight you. And I've always thought, because I'm only a little guy, I've always thought, wouldn't it be fascinating to spend a couple of days as a really big bloke and see what effect it would have on me as a person? Because, you know, you can tell when you see McAvoy that if fancy took him, he could twist your head off. And I've never had that. I've had to actually twist people's heads off before they know I can, which is you know, so I think it would give me a different set of motivations in life. I think there's a line in one of the books where it says that he could have been a contender as a boxer if he'd had the killer instinct, and that's the thing. Aector's always been frightened that he has got a killer instinct and he holds it in check. But I think everybody who's got to know him now realizes that there's only a couple of triggers for that. So he'll do what needs to be done, but he wouldn't think of himself as a dangerous man. And if he did think of himself as a dangerous man, he would try and stop himself immediately. He ties himself up in knots with what is the right thing to do in every circumstance. So I like putting him in circumstances where he's got the option of punching somebody or not punching somebody. I like to see what he'll do in those circumstances.
Well, your other characters aren't like him at all, are they? You've got a lot of strong female characters in your books, particularly in Powerful Jobs. You know, his boss, Trish Farrow, is very much not like him, is she?
Oh, she's the complete polar opposite, and I love her immensely. She's much more fun to write than he is. You know, Trish says what she feels like saying, and she does what she feels like doing, and she's a mess, but in a good way. You know, I think she's quite a real human being. I mean, we do live in this age where people talk about strong female characters all the time, and I find it interesting because I just write people, and some of them have breasts and some of them don't. And it really, you know, I love it that people say, oh yeah, he writes women well. But I don't feel as though I'm any more capable of writing a man well than I am of writing a woman well. I'm just a person. I'm a soul in this vessel. So, I write a believable person, and hopefully people get something out of it. But there is very in vogue at the moment for people to say somebody is a strong female character, when if you met that strong female character in the street, you'd think they're a bit of a cow. So it's, sometimes what works in fiction and what we all know in reality are somewhat at a great remove from one another. But personally, I think that Trish is best off within the pages of a book. I would find her a little bit overwhelming and fearsome in reality, I think. Whereas Rasheen, Aector's wife, apparently, according to many women in my life, it's just far too good to be true. She's an overly simplified, majestic creature that would never exist in reality. So there you go. I don't know if I write believable women or just really, really good ones.
Well, you talk about in reality there, David, and obviously your provenance as a crime journalist for the Yorkshire Post, many years doing that, means you were rooted in the authenticity of many cases across the board. I mean, did you start writing your fiction during that time, or what made you leave real crime to become a fictional crime fiction writer?
Well, I mean, I spent years on what I thought of as a stepping stone. I wanted to be a novelist, but from my sort of background from Carlisle, where there was nobody really in my world who could give me a leg up to becoming a novelist. I sort of didn't really know how you did it. I spent a long time writing very miserable semi-memoirs about being a miserable journalist, and nobody wanted to publish them. It was really very much a case of I didn't expect to be a journalist as long, but it took me many years to become what laughingly referred to as an overnight success. But the thing is, what I wanted was to make it authentic. I wanted to write stories that were believable within the real world, even if it's a slightly heightened sense, sort of high concept. But unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you take it, is because I've been a journalist since I was 17, my idea of reality is completely different to everybody else's. So, my reality involved covering 3 or 4 murders a week. So when I was writing, I'd get messages back from agents and editors saying, that this wouldn't happen or this couldn't happen. And I'm like, well, it did happen to me last Tuesday. So it's sometimes a blessing and a curse, but I would never go back to journalism, largely because it doesn't really exist anymore. It's kind of gone since I left it. But I'll always be grateful for the fact that I got to meet the people who I write about, the victims, the families of the victims, the investigators, the people in the justice system. I've spent a lot of time with them. And I can still hopefully recreate their moods and their nuances, and so I've got that blessing. But whether or not I would have ever become a novelist if I hadn't been a journalist, who can say? And there's an awful lot of very, very good crime novelists who've never been close to a murderer. It's all a work of imagination. So I never know what people are coming to me for, whether it is authenticity or whether it is escapist fantasy. I'm never too sure. I think I live in fear of focus groups, the sort of people who can come back and confuse me even more with what the average reader wants. Because it seems to me that the average reader is somebody I wouldn't get on with. So I find it best just to focus on trying to tell the best stories that I can, really.
And you have, of course, we mention this all the time as a writer, you have control over that. But looking at your books, I mean, obviously they're optioned for television, and that's a whole different area of exploring the adaptation of a novel to the screen. But you also have, I believe, a stage adaptation.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, the whole thing is just kind of funny to me. I mean, some aspects of my life are so surreal that all I can do is giggle. That's really the only way to go about it. But yeah, when Dark Winter did well, a couple of local playwrights approached the same theatrical company and said, we'd like to adapt this. And they then got in touch with me. And, I said, well, fill your boots, do what, do what you want. Largely because I'm a pessimist. I didn't think it would ever happen. And really, I should have actually tied them down to some money. That would have been a help. But vanity prevails, as it does for all creative types. Just a mere 3 or 4 years later, it premiered at Hull Truck Theatre, and it was a sellout. And wonderful reviews, great cast, and now it's coming back in the main house at Hull Truck in November for another run. And this time I actually will make some money. So, I can't believe it.
Well,
really.
Congratulations, because it's very hard to make that transition. I mean, talking to Peter James about it, I mean, he's done it very successfully with his books. Rebus is about to be done in Birmingham, but it's not often that outside of Agatha Christie that they have successful.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to come and see that. I've never been to Hull.
You'd be very welcome, mate.
I would love to. That's in November. I'm going to see if I can come up and see that. I know you've got another theatre which Adrian Rawlins runs in Beverley. There's another theatre.
We have indeed. I can almost see that from my house. Actually.
Can you really?
It's literally just round the corner. I was having a meeting in there with Richard Vergette, the playwright, the other day actually, and I was suggesting to East Riding Theatre they might want to do a run of Dark Winter. And they gave me that very that look I see a lot of, which is do you not think we're busy enough? And where are we supposed to get the money for that? And I'd go and see it anywhere. It's I take no credit for it because the lads who've actually adapted it, they've done the hard work. I wrote the book, and people who want to understand how I see the story can still read the book. But to take it and turn it into something that stays true at that and works as an immersive theatrical experience is, I think that's a real talent.
Well, I mean, it's very generous of you, I have to say, because a lot of writers think the complete reverse of that. They think this gets cocked up by people who are adapting their books.
They do for telly.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe that playwrights share the same creative headspace as novelists far more than screenwriters do. I mean, my own experience with TV wasn't particularly great fun. There's an awful lot of nice lunches, an awful lot of blowing smoke up your ass, but what you want to see is a product. I think there's some very successful people in TV who just exist to justify their own existence, and I find all that as your typical gruff northerner, I find all that really tiresome. I just think if you want to make it, make it. If you don't. But this middle ground where they want to own it but do nothing with it makes no sense to me. So I like the.
I've known producers who've actually optioned things just to actually stop it being made because they've got something else similar in the pipeline.
Oh, I can believe it.
So it's a fairly ruthless. It's a fairly ruthless business, and as you say, I mean, have you ever watched W1, the drama of the comedy?
Yes,
drama?
That's a documentary without doubt.
As a writer, you can't watch that without crying, both with laughter and with real, genuine, painful tears. But so I tell you what. It's not just DS Aector McAvoy. You actually are now writing historical crime novels as well. The Zealot's Bones, with another character with a particular name, a Christian name. I don't know. Is it Meshach or Misach or?
To me, it's Meshach.
Meshach Stone. Yeah. God, you're good on Christian names.
Well, I'm a great fan of Tinker Tailor, and I think that Le Carré does the best names in all of fiction. Now there's a contentious point to throw out there, but I'm a great fan of the circus and how the Percy Allaline and Norman Smiley, and I think that the way Yeah, well, the names are just world class. I don't really know anybody else who manages to make the name fit the character so beautifully well without seeming like a contrivance. So I spend a lot of time with my main cast trying to make sure the name works. With my incidental characters, I essentially look around in my office and I'll see the first name on a spine of another book and just have that. So yeah,
something else we've got in common.
Yeah. Oh, my books are littered with Billinghams and Rankins and McDermotts. It's that's the only way to do it as far as I'm concerned. I even run competitions. If you want to kill your boss, just tell me their name. I'll put them in my books, no problem. Otherwise, all the kids in my old school, New Lathe Junior School, circa 1985, I think I've bumped all of them off so far as well. So there's a pattern for those who care to look.
Well, could you tell us a bit about Zealot's bones? It sounds fascinating. I mean, from what I've read, it's someone is hunting for the bones of Simon the Zealot in Lincolnshire. And
indeed, the most enigmatic of the apostles, which always makes me think of the front cover of a ye olde edition of Q magazine. You know, who is Simon the Zealot, and get up close and personal with him. But yeah, there is a theory that Simon the Zealot was Lazarus, famously raised from the dead by Jesus, and there is another theory that after the death of Christ, Simon the Zealot came to Britain to preach the Gospels, where he was crucified in a place called Caister in Lincolnshire, and his bones are buried somewhere close by. Now that story has always fascinated me because I used to live in that area. Simultaneously, I read a book about the first archaeologists, the people who were looking for proof of the Gospels. And they would go and dig in dusty old places and try and find, the bones of Christ and the bones of St. Andrew and the like. And I came up with this character of he was a Quaker from Canada called Diligence Matheson, who was in Lincolnshire looking for the bones of the apostle. And it was kind of a nice idea. I didn't really know what I would do with it, but it just kept talking to me. And then I had this secondary idea that he'd have a bodyguard. He'd have somebody there to keep him safe. And the more I thought about his background, the more I realised that he was my principal character. And this was Meshach Stone, the bastard son of a nobleman, the traitor and hero of the retreat from Kabul in Afghanistan. And essentially, the things I knew from history that I knew well all seemed to sort of splurge out in this icing bag of my imagination. And it became this rather unwieldy, crazy novel that I don't think anybody else would have written. Not that anybody else could have written, but it was just that it was about 8 books in one. And it all coalesced into this story written on the landscape of a cholera-ridden city. And a serial killer using a plague to cover their crimes. And it all sounds rather... I don't think I'll ever write another one because
you're not going to make this a series. Is this a one-off? The Zealot's Bones?
Hey, my integrity is very much for sale. So anybody who wants to pay me to write one, I will absolutely write another one and just damn the consequences. But I'll have to say that I don't think of myself as a historical novelist. I think of myself as essentially as a psychological thriller writer, with hopefully quite three-dimensional characters. And this just happened to be on a different landscape.
And managing to do it all with a little baby in the background as well, which...
Well, you heard that, did you? That was
that's a very familiar sound, don't worry.
Yeah, that is Artemisia Violet Mark, the apple of my eye, the youngest of my many children, who was just woken up from a nap and wants to tell me that she'd like to put her thumbs in my eyes and slap me on the head for a while, which is her favourite thing to do.
All sounds very familiar.
Yeah, well, I don't know about you. Are you blessed with a beard, Adam, or not?
I am. Yeah. That tends to get attention.
Help, does it?
No.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's my beard spends most of its time being yanked out by the roots.
And chest hairs as well. When you're lying in bed in the morning, that's the other thing they tend to go for.
Oh, absolutely, and she's strong. She's currently chewing on a polar bear at the moment, and I hasten to add it's a fake one, but with Artemisia, she could easily do it with a real one. There is no fear in this girl.
Do you have many of those in Beverley?
You never know what you're going to find in Beverley, to be honest. You know, one minute you're talking to what seems like a perfectly reasonable person in the pub, and the next minute you find out they voted Brexit. So, you know, you never know what you're going to find.
You're a great tweeter. I was reading some of your tweets this morning. They made me laugh. And
thank you.
I mean, so that's another area of self-expression for writers.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it is good. I tweet for me rather than for the reader. Yeah. I like to think that I write my books for the reader, which means I hold my 20 extra pages describing the sunrise. I hold that in abeyance as a sort of a sop to the reader. The writer in me wants to give that room to breathe, but I tweet for me, essentially, just to cheer myself up.
Exactly.
David, thank you so much for joining us on the show this week. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
And to you, yeah. And Robert, I have to tell you, you were always my favourite character in Jeeves and Wooster.
Oh, well, kind of you. Thank you very much. Well,
I can do a mean impression of you talking about cockaliki soup in the episode filmed in America. This is how...
I think we'll have to hear that before you go.
I'd forgotten all about that, David. Good. Well, how interesting, because I do a little quote at the end of each of these podcasts, and today, it quite by chance, it happens to be one by P.G. Wodehouse. So I'm glad you brought that. Well, I'm blushing. Thank you. We're
going to have to hear this impression before you go, though, David.
What have I let myself in for? I'm afraid I'm going to have to play the Emily Thornberry card and say that I take myself far too seriously to. And I say that as somebody who's madly in love with Emily Thornberry. So there you go.
Well, as a writer, as we know, it's best sometimes not to show your full hand and to leave things to the reader's imagination, which is often scarier than reality.
So it is absolutely. I must admit, of all the things I was prepared for this morning, having to suddenly do a Robert Dawes Tuppy impression. Oh my God, too much.
I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And I'll tell you what, your impression is probably better than mine. But
David, it's been a joy and a pleasure speaking to you.
And thank you for having me. Hopefully I'll catch up with you at Harrogate, I should think.
Quite possibly so. I won't be there this year, unfortunately. I will be nearby.
I was asked to be a dead body this year.
Oh, nice. Nice. Great indeed.
Well, I mean, it's one way of looking at your career, I suppose. But but I couldn't do it, unfortunately, because I'm away. So neither of us are going to be there. But it looks absolutely fantastic. And Lee Child has got a marvellous programme.
It's one of the best. Definitely. I had the joy of being involved with the programming committee a few years ago, and you know, I wasn't this time around, but I can sense the excitement that was in the room when they were putting this panel, this program together. It's a really good looking one. So I'd encourage everybody, if you've never been to Harrogate, for God's sake, go to Harrogate.
Yes.
That'll be my advice.
It's definitely the crime festival of choice for most people, and internationally. And it's got a great atmosphere. You know, there it is in the hotel that Agatha Christie decided to disappear to when she went missing. I mean, so it's steeped in that sort of crime tradition anyway. But everyone is there, and all the great crime writers are there, and including yourself next week. And so anyone wanting to visit, just go there, because you'll meet the most extraordinary people and have a wonderful time.
If you happen to, it can be quite life affirming if you're a wannabe writer, because once you see household names absolutely hammered at 2:00 in the morning, falling into the bushes, you'll realise that if these half-wits can do it, then anybody can. So.
Genuine inspiration.
That is Harrogate summed up in a sentence, to be fair.
It really is. It really is.
They've still got the bush that Agatha Christie fell into, actually, I think.
That's where she was for all that time.
That's where she couldn't get up.
Well, this time next year, David, we'll be there, and we will fall into bushes at 2:00 in the morning together. How about that?
It's a date. It's a date.
I look forward. I'm going to try and get up to see that play in November. But I tell you what, it's been such good fun talking to you, and hopefully I'll be able to bump into you again at some point. I'll be listening out for the impersonation of myself.
I promise I'll have practiced by then. I'll be prepared.
Okay, and I'll do one of you too, just out of respect.
Thank you very much.
I love David, Bob. I think he's...
Well, I understand your love affair after talking to him just now. I mean, what a fantastically entertaining guest. Hugely funny, hugely entertaining.
And a wonderfully good-looking chap as well, with the the receding hair and the beard.
Do you know what? He reminds me of a better-looking someone. I can't think who... No, I can't imagine who it is. Oh!
If you want to get hold of any of David's books, and I can strongly recommend them, start with Dark Winter. That's an absolute belter of a book. Head over to kobo.com, find that book, Dark Winter by David Mark, enter the promo code CRIME when you get to the checkout, and the wonderful folk at Kobo will give you 90% off if it's your first ebook purchase. Great speaking to David. It's and it's so refreshing to hear of a detective who's not, and I say this myself as somebody who writes those exact kind of detectives, who's not that kind of brash, out there, sort of so cocksure of himself.
Cliches that when people say, he's got none of those sort of problems. He's got certain problems of shyness and a sense of inadequacy, which I suppose you do find in other detectives. But it's absolutely extraordinary. And just his sheer physical presence, which comes off the page, certainly in the description, is great and beautifully explained by the author himself. I'm really looking forward to reading the McAvoy series. DS Aector McAvoy. No, that's
it's Aector with a little cough in the middle.
Okay,
Aector.
Aector.
That'll do.
Okay, right. Okay, there we are. But it sounds great. You're quite right. Now, here we are. My little quote for the week, for what it's worth.
Bob's thought for the day. I'm going to get a little jingle made up. Bob's thought for the day. We should do a little bit of violin music and a nice soothing... Bob's thought for the day.
Bob's bonkers thought for the day. As I said, quite by chance, I say once again, this is a quote by the great Plum P.G. Woodhouse, who didn't write crime, it has to be said, but he did have thoughts on what it is to be a writer. And as I know, several listeners to this podcast are writing. They're writing their first novels. They're trying to get started. They're putting everything into their writing they can, in the hope and hopeful expectation that they will do as well as many of our guests, well, all of our guests, because the fact is, if they're a guest on Partners in Crime, they're doing very well as crime fiction writers.
Only the best.
Only the best is good enough. But this is what P.G. Woodhouse said about writers and their first novels. It has been well said that an author who expects results from a first novel is in a position similar to that of a man who drops a rose petal down the Grand Canyon of Arizona and listens for the echo.
True.
Well, sometimes not. Sometimes people...
Well, yes.
Very
on the
occasionally,
whole, it's, you shouldn't expect to hear an echo.
No.
And quite often, even people who have success with their, in inverted commas, first novel, it might be the first novel that was published. It could be the fifth or sixth that they've written, others having been rejected and what have you.
Yes. Don't listen for the echo, but do expect at times a cavernous, empty...
Oh yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Yes,
and a long climb.
And a long climb. Yes.
So no, I mean, when people say to me about having been an overnight success, but seeming to ignore the fact that it was my 9th released book, never mind the ones that were written and not released.
The overnight success comes because you're suddenly discovered by a lot of people who haven't really heard of you before.
Yeah.
So they think you're brand new. They don't realise that you've been absolutely sort of hiking through the foothills of crime fiction writing.
And releasing books
years.
for 5 years.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, we've known each other since you began starting writing, and those first 5 years are a great amount of work, and still is, because the more successful you are, the more expectations there are on your writing, and also the bigger the platform you have, which you have to maintain as a writer to actually talk to your readers and do all the other things that writers have to do to actually bring their work to the public's attention.
But I think if you keep plugging away, it will come.
Yes.
What times where it doesn't work, it tends to be people giving up.
Yeah.
So keep writing, keep getting the books out there, I think, is the secret. That's what I always say anyway if people ask me for advice, which I'm well aware that nobody has.
Doesn't stop you giving it.
It doesn't. But why else have a podcast if you can't just sit here and give your own opinions on things?
Well, I thought it's because we just wanted to chat. We sort of put a microphone. I usually pop round for a cup of coffee and a chat anyway. We just decided to microphone it.
Thought we'd record it. That was pretty much how it started.
It pretty much was, but now we do, and I don't see a cup of coffee.
Oh well, should we go downstairs and sort that out then?
Yes, please go down to the kitchen. Black, no sugar, thank you.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.